As some of you know, Trump, as he may be defeated by Kamala Harris, is really upset that he's not still running against Joe Biden. And if Donald Trump is indeed defeated by Kamala Harris, it will probably stack up as the greatest humiliation to Trump of his life. To Trump. Because the idea that the country might choose a non-white woman over him, how could that possibly be? Which
we're leading in all 7 swing states, as you probably know.
And of course, this very much appears not to be the case, at least in Michigan and Wisconsin. Trump does not appear to be leading, and it's very much starting to turn the other way. I'm going to tell you something that is terrifying me.
It's that mustache.
I always try to come here.
Hi everyone. This election has been a real roller coaster. Unlike 2 weeks ago when I went to Forth Park with friends and only got to be there on 2 rides, despite being there for 6 hours. That's £39 down the drain. Screw those long lines. Though, to those who waited in line to vote for Trump, at least you clearly got what you wanted. And the rest of you clearly didn't get what you wanted. Including me. But I didn't want Harris either, so I was screwed either way. But for those who wanted a Harris win, it hasn't been easy. Just ask David Pakman.
I'm going to tell you something that is terrifying me. I always try to come here and put a positive face on everything, but there is something going on that is terrifying me. When I woke up this morning, we had lost 5,000 YouTube subscribers compared to where we were last night. Now, the first thing I thought was, is this a glitch? We've been on YouTube for 15 years or something like that, and subscribers always just go up. They just never go down. They go up. Is something wrong with my channel? Is someone attacking my channel? What's going on? So I started texting, and I texted Brian Tyler Cohen, and I texted Tyler Cohen and Brian Cohen and Brian Tyler, all of them. I texted all of them. I texted Jesse Dollemore. I texted Luke Beasley and Farron Cousins and Sam Cedar. And every single one of our channels since last night is hemorrhaging subscribers. What is it that is going on? Here is a graphic. As you can see, subscribers just go up, 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 and they are down.
That's right. He has lost a ton of subscribers just after the election, including other notable left-wing content creators such as Sam Cedar and Brian Tyler Cohen. And it gets even worse.
It is not just YouTube subscribers. We are seeing record cancellations of paid memberships. Record cancellations. These are the people that keep the show running. Now, for a moment, I thought, if it's just YouTube, maybe YouTube is purging people who are inactive subscribers. And once a year, usually YouTube does this and you see a little decline and then numbers go back up. They're not doing it. They're not doing it. And if that were the case, we wouldn't be seeing paid membership cancellations on the website. So now I understand what is going on. It's terrifying, but it is happening. A lot of people are checking out. I heard anecdotally from a couple dozen people who said, you know, David, I just can't do it anymore. I just can't do it. I'm checking out. I'm out.
David Pakman and other leftist subscribers may be leaving and cancelling memberships because they are utterly despondent from Kamala's loss. And you know what? I get it. As a conservative, I understand the temptation to laugh at so-called leftist tears, but everyone loses. The conservatives in my country just suffered one of the worst election defeats in history. And the 2020 election, back when I preferred Trump to win, was a pretty humbling experience. I still think DeSantis would have been a better Republican candidate. So I think we should restrain ourselves from kicking our favorite progressives when they're down and... Wait a minute, what's this? Trump voters are going to get what they deserve. Huh?
And now Trump and his voters are going to have to bear the consequences of his governance, which is not going to spare supporters from harm. One thing we learned in this election is Democrats can't win over these voters with policy arguments. It didn't work. We've got to acknowledge that. Any serious post-mortem has to concede that that's the case.
So Pakman thinks you can't convince Trump voters with policy arguments. Well, considering Trump's stranglehold on the Republican Party, his charisma and iconic one-liners, there's a solid argument to be made that policy may sadly not be what attracted these voters to Trump. Especially when accounting for people's current negative perceptions of the economy, inflation, and immigration without studying deeply into these topics. And there can be many legitimate critiques of the incoming Trump administration, such as his tariffs. I will not be bothered in trying to defend some of Trump's other stupid ideas, his rejection of the 2020 results, and his growing authoritarianism from Pakman. But here's the thing, the Dems and the voters have many policy errors, especially since they don't understand their own policies, how it will hurt the US, and in some ways how similar their policies are to Trump's. For instance, the Democrats have embraced their own form of protectionism. Biden decided to extend Trump's tariffs earlier this year. Now some may argue that Biden only did it because Trump's tariffs had led to retaliatory tariffs, and that removing them all at once will reduce bargaining power to lower these retaliatory tariffs from other countries. Now I am skeptical of this since Biden also expanded these tariffs as well. So why would he increase tariffs if he wants to discourage retaliatory tariffs in the first place? Regardless, this isn't the only protectionist policy from the Democrats. In addition, the Democrats, along with Republican support, enacted the CHIPS Act. This act provides subsidies such as investment tax credits and other incentives to companies to manufacture semiconductors within the US for security reasons against China. We can already see one problem with this from a previous policy in America's past, the 1986 Semiconductor Trade Agreement. This agreement forced Japan to implement export controls on their Japanese chip companies, as such as not dumping DRAM chips on the US. This created a net welfare loss of $974 million and cost US consumers over $525,000 for each manufacturing job potentially saved. After the Semiconductor Trade Agreement, domestic US semiconductor prices rose, and there was a shortage of DRAMs. Computer manufacturers like Apple were dependent on DRAM, so were crippled and less able to compete with Asian and European manufacturers since they instead could get cheaper DRAMs. This hurt the computer manufacturing industry so bad that they lost one computer manufacturing job for a semiconductor job that was allegedly saved. As the CHIPS Act subsidies will have similar protectionist effects, we can expect prices of semiconductors to rise, and American industries, depending on these semiconductors, to have job losses. Regardless of whether you think this is necessary to fight China, you can understand if people may oppose this policy on empirical and economic grounds. Moreover, the Inflation Reduction Act was another piece of protectionist fecal matter. It had green provisions where they subsidized electric vehicles and other clean technologies. But the catch is that these green tech companies can only get these subsidies and tax breaks if their final production assembly is in North America. This would encourage green tech companies to produce in the US, Canada, and Mexico rather than Europe, and hurt green tech companies in Europe since their American competition has lower costs. This has created tensions between the US and the European Union, where the latter argues that these green provisions violate the World Trade Organization's principles of non-discrimination. So the Biden-Harris administration has been quite protectionist in a similar vein to Trump, and has even been angering their key allies in doing so. Now the Democrats may be fair in critiquing Trump's protectionist tendencies, but are you seriously telling me that the Democratic voters who hate Trump's tariffs rationally voted for Kamala Harris based on policy arguments? Anyways, if you're enjoying this video so far, please give a like and comment as it really helps me in the YouTube algorithm, as well as consider subscribing. And this really helps. If you don't really believe me, ask David Pakman.
But when we start canceling the subscriptions, we are in an algorithmic desubscription spiral right now, because when people start unsubscribing on YouTube, YouTube thinks, oh, we probably shouldn't recommend this content because it's generating a lot of unsubscribes. So then the content doesn't get recommended. And then the message doesn't get out. And then next election, they win by even more.
You know, at the start, I was kinda sorry for you, but the condescending smugness, lack of humility, and elitism makes me think the YouTube algorithm is right in not recommending your content. Just like how I wouldn't recommend the Inflation Reduction Act in reducing inflation. Yes, this policy has more than one problem. The so-called Inflation Reduction Act demonstrates that the Biden-Harris administration has a tendency to spread misinformation on what their policies will actually do.
Secondly, why did my keys miss? Because my keys are based upon the proposition that a pragmatic, rational electorate decides whether or not the White House party is governed well enough to get 4 more years. That was exploded this time by a new wave of disinformation that we've never seen before.
Yes, Alan Lichtman, the right does not have a monopoly on misinformation. You see, Penn Wharton estimates that the Inflation Reduction Act would have a very modest impact on inflation over the next decade, with estimates that aren't statistically different from zero. The CBO estimates show that the impact on inflation could be positive or negative, but any change would be too small to detect, and the impact still being statistically indistinguishable from zero. Even the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, who believes that the Inflation Reduction Act would have stronger deflationary effects, thinks these effects are likely to be modest. The Tax Foundation believe that the act will limit productive capacity, so it could actually worsen inflation via the higher tax proposals. So whether inflation is increased or decreased due to the ironically titled Inflation Reduction Act, the effect will be statistically insignificant and undetectable. But wait, the Democrats have another way to fight inflation. Somehow. Cause they care about policy. Right?
And there are many voters that supported Trump, not for his policies, but for his reality show of rage and resentment fueled by nativist instinct and fascist wet dreams and cultural grievances.
Funny how you talk about so-called fascist wet dreams. Is it because you were aroused by Kamala's authoritarian price controls? Sorry, anti-price gouging laws. At least that's the politically correct term for economic illiteracy. You see, Kamala Harris also proposed so-called anti-price gouging laws to combat this inflation. These are basically price controls that are automatically activated during times of natural disasters such as hurricanes or floods, and have been active in 32 American states before the pandemic. And during the pandemic, 8 more states created these laws, and these 42 states activated or enacted these price controls where they categorized the pandemic as an emergency akin to a natural disaster. Harris wanted to categorize so-called excessive price rises of goods as an emergency. She believed in the corporate greed myth, and thought companies only raise prices because they can, rather than because of the large federal spending. But this is a really bad policy. It's been estimated that these price gouging regulations would increase economic damages for 2 months after the hurricanes Rita and Katrina by between $1.5 to $2.9 billion, and that price gouging regulations decrease economic growth after hurricanes. But there is an even more interesting case study of this policy. During COVID, social distancing was encouraged to prevent the spread of the virus. But price controls like these anti-price gouging laws are associated with shortages. Consumers understood this and bought more things during the pandemic because of the shortages, as well as anticipating future shortages from the price controls. This led to more in-store searches in groceries and pharmacies, which increased social contact significantly. Something you don't want in a pandemic. After all, counties with price gouging regulation increase social contact by 38 or more contacts per device per day, and 6.7% greater pharmacy and grocery visits per day than in counties without price gouging regulation. And with pandemic controls, the effect was only a little smaller, as counties with price gouging regulation increased social contact by 37 or more contacts per device per day, and 6.5% greater pharmacy and grocery visits per day than in counties without price gouging regulation. These price controls may be quite lethal, as American counties with price gouging regulation had significantly higher daily confirmed cases and daily confirmed deaths than American counties without price gouging regulation.
What?
Now, we are unlikely to have another pandemic anytime soon to see the negative effects of these price controls, but this shows the unintended consequences of anti-price gouging regulation and the shortages they cause. And it's interesting how the policies that Kamala took as an inspiration have potentially killed people. On a less somber note, I find it rather ironic that Kamala Harris is trying to bring down inflation since her American Rescue Plan helped contribute to it. While there is great debate on the contribution of the American Rescue Plan towards inflation, there seems to be a solid consensus amongst economists that it significantly contributed to rising prices. One economist, Dean Baker, estimated that the act contributed to 2% inflation. Another economist, Douglas Holt-Eakin, estimated the same number for inflation. Michael Strain suggested that it led to 3% inflation, while Jason Furman estimated an even higher 4% inflation rate. So the estimates ranged from 2 to 4%, basically between a quarter and a half of the 8% inflation rate back in 2021. P.S. Even Dan Baker from the left-leaning Center for Economic Policy and Research isn't blaming corporations, since he argued that it's unlikely the inflation is because of corporate greed, since higher prices are needed to ration demand. Also, I have debunked this claim myself by pointing out the lack of correlation between company markups and inflation, as well as other data in previous videos that you can check out in the card or in the video description. But Pakman thinks he still has one trick up his sleeves.
If Trump's policies don't do much for the average Texas Latino voter, if they voted for Trump, they're still going to suffer as a result of Trump's policies. And as I've said before, from what I'm seeing, Trump's going to give me a tax cut. The type of business I have is likely going to get either a new tax cut or an extension of the previous QBID tax cut under Trump. It's not good for the economy. It's not morally justified. It's not economically stimulative to do that. But he's going to do it, and I didn't vote for the guy, but I'm still going to get, or my business is still going to get that tax cut. And the opposite is true for those that did vote for Trump. Remember Donald Trump's big 2017 tax cuts, which were hyped up as helping the middle class? But what actually happened? It was the wealthiest Americans that got the biggest benefits, while many of his working class supporters saw little or no impact, and the deficit completely exploded. Which, if you believe that an explosive deficit is bad for the middle class, then it was very bad for the middle class. So now Trump is coming back. He wants to do it again with another round of tax cuts or extensions. And who do you really think is going to benefit? His core base certainly is not. Economists are warning that this is going to explode the deficit again, potentially forcing cuts to federal programs that many of his supporters rely on. Now,
well, Pakman, Trump's previous tax cuts actually did cut taxes across the board for various income groups. People who earn between $15,000 and $20,000 a year had their tax liabilities fall by 12.5%, and those who earned between $40,000 and $50,000 had their average tax liabilities fall by 14.5%. And it looks like it was actually stimulative, since the tax cuts capped SALT deductions at $10,000. SALT deductions are used by Americans to deduct federal and income taxes and are usually done in high-tax states. This means that high-tax states have even higher taxes after Trump's tax cuts. So we could see a really good experiment between low-tax American states and high-tax American states. An analysis of state employment data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics showed that low-tax states added non-farm payrolls 93.8% faster, and had a 97.9% higher rate of jobs growth than high-tax states from December 2017 to November 2019. The rate of manufacturing jobs also grew at 3.3% for low-tax states versus 1.3% for high-tax states. Though it is fair to say that the tax cuts had a negative impact on the deficit. Republicans have failed to keep spending under control. We'll see if that somehow changes with a certain new department. The childless cat lady and Coulter is probably mad that a bunch of foreigners are running that. Or at least what she considers foreigners. There is one final policy. Now I could go over Biden's billionaire tax and break down how similar wealth taxes in Europe have met little success, like in previous videos. But at this point it will be overkill. So I will end with this. If Biden tried to push this policy, he would face possible legal challenges and constitutional issues. It is hard to value illiquid, non-tradable assets, especially businesses worth over $100 million, since the assets are in those businesses. In other words, it is a waste of a policy. Now, I haven't gone through non-economic policies and ideas such as abortion and immigration since I specialize more in economics, and haven't done as much research for them in this election cycle, But Pakman should understand that if people consider abortion murder, then they are legitimately supporting Trump on the basis of policy. Look, I am not saying that the Trump administration isn't going to have problems. I'm actually concerned and even plan on making a video on one of Trump's policies. But don't act like people more likely voted for Kamala rather than Trump because they actually fought through their policies.
This is the moment where we have to support independent progressive media. If it's not my show, that's fine. Okay, there's plenty of shows you can support. Consider getting a membership. Consider it. We have a code. The new coupon code is not again. All one word, not again. It really represents the dread that we are all feeling. Consider getting a membership.
I may consider going to America, finding an illegal dealer, purchasing a rifle, pointing said rifle on my foot, and releasing the trigger. Much like what the Democrats basically did when they voted for Biden in 2020 despite his clear age problems and picked Kamala as president too late after the Democratic primary. Seriously, did you guys actually want to win? That's a legitimate question. You really messed this up. Regardless, I hope you guys wouldn't rather shoot your own foot rather than subscribe to my channel, as well as give a like and comment because, again, it really helps me in the YouTube algorithm. I mean, again, just ask David Pakman. But thanks for watching, guys. I haven't made that many videos for the 2024 election, and I'm not sure if I'll be able to pump out more content, but I'm still grateful for all of you watching. I'm really grateful for all the views that my short Destiny video got. I do have a backlog of content that I'm working on, so hopefully I can release them out as soon as possible. But I hope you've enjoyed this video. Bye.